And while you're sitting in the ready room, at least at the time, it may have been changed by now, but they had a video on the TV screen, and all it showed was carrier crashes, just footage of planes crashing and blowing up. And
Level 1, speed meters on the right. Alpha 2, speed meters on the left. 3, 2, 1, take off.
So after I graduated, it's all assuming you're physically qualified to go fly. Everything else is based on your grades and your overall scores. And I was fortunate enough to be high enough in the ranking so that I could get a pilot slot. And I ended up in Pensacola with the other hundreds and maybe thousands of hopefuls that were graduating that spring. And made my way through the training in Pensacola in Corpus Christi, Texas, which is where I went for my primary flight. Did well enough in T-34 flying that I was selected to go fly jets. And then I went down to Kingsville, Texas. And in Kingsville, we do the intermediate and advanced training. The intermediate at the time was T2 Buckeye. And then the advanced was the TA-4J. And I carrier qualified in the T2, that's the big final exam in intermediates. And then assuming you pass that, you move on to advance. And I flew in the A4 for another 6 months. And again, my final exam in that program was landing on an aircraft carrier in the A4, which was, again, quite thrilling.
So I guess for a lot of people, the landing on the boat is the big differentiator between the Air Force and the Navy, of course. How was that the first time? Did you pretty well have to go and change your pants afterwards, or did you love it?
I wasn't. It's difficult to describe because it's incredibly intense experience, obviously, and you spend essentially your whole training, a year and a half up to that point, training for that moment. And it's such a defining moment. It's such a make or break. And if you fail, obviously, you get one more chance. And if you fail again, then you're out. So it's so important. There's so much build up to it. The whole month before you go to the boat, whenever you're sitting in the ready room with all the other guys waiting for your turn to go out and do the carrier landing practices, and you do a month's worth of carrier landing practices just to etch those skills into your muscle memory. So you can think as little as possible. It's purely not purely reactive, but as reactive as possible. It's part of your instinctive, process. And while you're sitting in the ready room, at least at the time, it may have been changed by now, but they had a video on the TV screen, and all it showed was carrier crashes, just footage of planes crashing and blowing up, and people
That'll
running
cheer
around.
you up.
Yeah.
Hey guys, guess what? This could be you too.
It could be, and it was, unfortunately, for a number of people. But it just makes you realize that you potentially could die. You're no better or no worse than anybody else that has done this before you, and you better be sure that this is what you want, because this may or may not be your fate. It's quite possible.
So in terms of, it's interesting you say that, because I've often wondered, in terms of, and this actually it reminded me of a scene in your book, in terms of the practice for carrier landings before you actually go out to the boat. You're obviously doing it on the ground. Now I know They've got the is it Fresnel or Friesel lens? I can't remember the correct term.
Fresnel. We just call it the ball. Just say the ball.
Yep, the ball.
Yeah.
So you've got the ball there, I know. So do they actually have wires on the runway that you're landing and trying to trap on?
No, there's no wires. There is, however, a exact representation of the carrier landing area painted onto the runway right next to the meatball. So the LSOs are standing out on the side of the runway, and they can, they can obviously look up and see what the plane's doing and assess the quality of the landing just optically and using their ears. But you can also look and see exactly where the wheels touch down. And you can say, okay, it would have been long, it would have been short, it would have bolted, and that kind of stuff. So.
For some reason, I always thought that they would actually have the wires there to sort of give that extra, I guess, realism experience, because that's got to be the biggest one. I mean, if you don't catch the wire, you've got to hopefully get off the end safely, but otherwise.
Yep. No, you're right. And to answer your question from before, with all of that buildup from the training and the field carrier landing practices that we did, I actually don't really remember my first 2 passes at the boat in the T2 because I was so filled with anxiety or adrenaline that it was just I know it happened. I had kind of a vague recollection of seeing the ship, and when you put your hook down, I'll never forget one of our instructors says, the second you move that handle and put the hook down, 90% of your brain power goes away. You just become, it's pure stem power at that point. And so the first 2 passes we do are touch and goes. I think that's actually the first 4 passes are touch and goes. And then after that, you put your hook down in the T2 and you get your first trap. And I remember the first trap pretty well because obviously I stopped. And I remember forgetting to stop. As soon as in the Navy, when you touch down on a ship, you go to full power as soon as you feel the wheels touch down. Yep. And once you're fully stopped, you bring the power back on your own, unless your brain blasted out the front of your head and you just sit there for a few seconds at full power fighting against the arresting gear, and the air boss comes up and says, "Okay, buddy, we got you now. You can throttle back." So that's what happened to me. I forgot to bring the power back.
So when your first couple of landings, are these in a 2-seater with an instructor in the back, or are you by yourself?
It is a 2-seater, but there's no instructor. You're on your own.
So they figure if you're going to screw up, you just kill one person instead of a valued instructor, basically.
Yeah, I think it's just a sink or swim. It's like, hey, this is the big boy world, or big girl now, obviously. This is your job. Go out and do it. If you can't do it, then you shouldn't be here. You don't need somebody in the backseat telling you how to fix your problems. Right. This is your job. Go do it. So you're on your own.
Fair enough. Sounds good. So, so you managed to land safely. Obviously, you passed. What happened after that? What did they do? Did they assign you a specific plane or a squadron or a ship? Where did you go from there?
Yeah, so you finish the T2. You essentially do everything again with a few added phases in the A4. And once you carrier qualify in the A4, then basically you're done. There may be a couple little flights that you need to do to clean everything up. But then you get winged. You get the wings of gold, which is what everybody's after in that program anyway. And after that, you get your assignment. I was inspired to write Lines of the Sky by my experiences flying in the Navy, all the insane characters and personalities that I came across, really colorful, wonderful people, the inherent adventure and excitement of the community and the job, and flying fighters off of aircraft carriers, and specifically the sort of rising conflict in the South China Sea that, I'm not going to say I anticipated. It's been brewing for probably 2 decades now, but I just saw it as a really natural conclusion for the dramatic aerial combat that happens at the end. I was fortunate enough to have the Secretary of the Navy, former Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus, read my book. We were introduced through a friend, and I asked if he could read the book and if he'd like it to endorse it, and he did so. And it was hugely complimentary to me to have somebody who represented the Navy at the highest level not only read the book but enjoy it and endorse it for the dust cover. So that is a huge accomplishment, I think. My first ride in the Tomcat in the F-14 was actually as a college student between my sophomore and junior years in college. I was part of a program that got to experience a variety of different options for postgraduate work in the Navy, and I got to go out to Miramar as like a 19-year-old kid on a Wednesday, get in the backseat of an F-14. And I found out later that my pilot was the chief technical pilot and coordinator for the movie Top Gun. And I was his first flight after having filmed Top Gun. So it was a long time ago, but it was a great experience. And that night I got to go to the famed Miramar Oak Club and, celebrate my first flight on F-14 and probably one of the most colorful and lively bar environments in the world at the time. So it was awesome. The hooks were set. I was done. I was ready to sign up for life. The most common feedback for me on the book, or at least the most memorable, comes from people that are surprised that they enjoyed a military thriller so much because it's not their normal genre. And that was really the goal, to write a book that was not only thrilling and exciting and dealt with the world that I lived in, but is relatable to people that don't have any background in the military or aviation in general. So that's the best feedback I could get, and I've gotten quite a bit of that. I hope Lions of the Sky sounds interesting and intriguing to you, and you decide to pick it up. If you do, go to your local Amazon. It's available in hardback, paperback, Kindle, and audiobook as well. Thank you so much.